The Ohio Chamber of Commerce proudly brings you another episode of Down to Business, a podcast that elevates the voices of business, community, and thought leaders, aiming to empower you and your business. That's why we're here, to aggressively champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Now, without further ado, it's time to get down to business. Welcome to Down to Business, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of Ohio's business landscape. I'm Steve, and I'll guide you through stories, strategies, and successes that shape Ohio's vibrant economy. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a business leader, or just someone curious about the dynamic world of Ohio business, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to talk to Dave Robinson and John Melchi about the housing market in Ohio, what's going on with housing, what we can expect, where things stand, what some concerns are. Let's dive right in. First, I'll talk to Dave Robinson. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about the Montrose Group, the group you lead?
Sure, Steve, and really glad to be here today with your podcast. And I think you might have a future in radio. I think that that intro is really impressive. I don't know what John thinks, but it's like
that was take 36.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up.
I know. But I started laughing the minute you said that.
It's been a while since you've done a TV ad for Congress, so you'll get it down. Montrose Group is an economic development and public policy consulting company. We've been around for 15 years. I know that because LinkedIn sent me an anniversary note. So again, we've been very fortunate. And been really engaged in a lot of great public policy issues and economic development ones like housing.
Now, John, you're at the BIA. Can you tell everybody about the BIA and what it does and how involved you are in housing?
Yeah, thanks. Again, thanks for having us. The BIA, we're actually in our 81st year representing the residential construction and development industry here in Central Ohio. So that can be everybody from one guy with a truck remodeler to some of the largest builders in the United States, and on the multifamily side, everybody from Homeport and Habitat for Humanity to some of the big projects you see all around the region.
That's great. Well, John, the BIA just released a study on housing and the state of housing in January. Can you talk a little bit about what the current state of housing is and a little bit about what was in that report?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take a step back. The association did a housing needs assessment for Central Ohio a couple years ago. Said we should be building somewhere between 17 and 19,000 homes, and we've been missing that mark really since 2006 in Central Ohio. And one of the markets we look at closely is Indianapolis. And we said, well, how in Indianapolis do they build 2,500 more homes than us annually at a cost of about $30,000 cheaper? And we started kicking around some numbers and learned that there were some structural issues in that state and in those communities that really put them at a housing creation advantage over Central Ohio. But to formalize things, the BIA's foundation hired Dave and his team over at Montrose Group to do a study, and I think what they showed is just that the demand in Central Ohio and across the state is significant. There's a need for housing of all types, all stripes, all across the state. But the environment and market conditions for builders in this state are not advantageous and really put us at a disadvantage versus other parts of the United States.
John, you were kind of kind when you said that Indianapolis is at an advantage, but when I look at Columbus versus markets like Dallas, Houston, Raleigh, Charlotte, even Indianapolis, just a couple hours, 3 hours away from us, it feels like it's not that they're at an advantage, it's that we're at a disadvantage. There's some laws and other things in Ohio that make it harder here. Dave, did you look at any of that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah. Steve, we dug into that. And the reality is, for the state, Columbus is the best market that exists. It's really the Columbus and Cincinnati MSA are the only two MSAs that are really growing substantially. Columbus, from a population standpoint, is up 17% over the last decade. Cincinnati's about 5%. Dayton's at 1%, and then every other MSA in the state actually has negative growth. I also think, and John would certainly have a good perspective on this, I think the housing industry has struggled to recover from the Great Recession. First of all, that really has made it more challenging as a business to develop housing. Then you add in the state's slow population growth. It's about 1.2%. I know you really hit on that hard with the Chamber's blueprint public policy agenda. So I know you share that concern. But if you're not growing, it's tough to attract private capital, and that's what it's going to take. Then you add in factors like Ohio's property tax is double what it is in those competitor states that you mentioned. If you're looking at Texas or the Carolinas or Indiana, we have a lot of government. And again, there's a lot of good people out there trying their best, but again, go back to our friends in Indiana. Their townships don't make zoning decisions. They have a much more expedited land use entitlement process. There's the number of states that don't have any zoning referendums at all. So, unfortunately for Ohio, we have every layer of government involved in the decisions to build houses, which can prove really difficult. And then you add in, even if you do everything right and you get the local community to agree that the housing project's a good idea, a very small number of people, literally I think it's 15% can basically gather signatures on a petition. You get up to 15% of the voters in that district, that community, in that township. They can put the issue on the ballot. So it is very difficult at times to get housing done with the regulatory framework that exists in Ohio.
So we saw that very thing you just described of a housing project up in Delaware County of $700,000 to $1.5 million homes be forced into a referendum, and then the referendum lost. We weren't even talking about affordable housing. We weren't even talking about, market rate housing that most people can afford. They were luxury homes, and they still lost a referendum. Is that commonplace, Dave or John?
Unfortunately, it becomes more and more commonplace. And, we refer to this as the weaponization of the referendum process, because what it does is, for many developers, if a community has a reputation for utilizing the referendum process, they won't even go there. But Steve, the area you're just talking about, we're talking about one independent Ohio-based land developer company who had two projects, one in Union County and one in Delaware County, within a 6-month period, lose at referendum, costing this region over 1,000 homes. And it's a trend that unfortunately continues. And for those developers, it's a major loss. They've invested in the whole zoning and entitlement process. They were ready to go and begin putting lots of people to work, construction workers, interior design, lenders, everybody to work. And both those projects and 1,000 home opportunities were simply denied by a small percentage of voters.
Yeah. Well, and think about it from the standpoint, and Central Ohio is blessed to have phenomenal local home builder developers that are based here. But our region's growing so much that there's, we've talked to a number of out-of-state residential developers that are, the 17% growth rate, they're pretty good at math. They're like, that's a place we want to be. And you explain the process to them, and then you explain that you go through this timely, expensive, arduous entitlement process to get land ready, and then, oh, by the way, it can go to referendum. You lose a lot of people because they're not used to operating in that environment, and they just see a lot of risk. So it is. We've got a lot of regulatory challenges at the local level with residential development.
Dave, you and John have talked about some of the factors driving affordability issues, whether it's the local control, the referendum, the standards being so hard compared to other folks, including some of the costs that are driving it. Are there strategies being considered, or did your report look at how we address some of these things and how we should move forward to deal with housing in Ohio. Is there a policy solution that we need to look at to make sure that that we can get more housing? Obviously, the state just passed an affordable housing plan that will leverage federal tax credits more for a state tax credit program. But we need more than subsidized housing. We need to figure out how to scale up unsubsidized housing. Did your report look at those kind of things?
Absolutely. Well, Steve, you're absolutely right. I mean, we are. It's kind of economics 101, right? Adam Smith's laws apply to residential development. The Central Ohio's had an 80% increase in the median listing price for residential development from 2016 to 2023. Median incomes have gone up, but only gone up 25%. So again, that you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that that's going to drive up home prices. So it has made it very difficult. I think that the solutions that we looked at aren't just money, and I know that's for some folks and a lot of policymakers that may sound strange, because I think they're used to folks like us coming in saying, well, if you just gave us this tax credit or this program, and there is some of that that's out there, so we'll go over that, but a lot of it is that regulatory structure that we talked about. A lot of it is should small rural townships that, in a lot of cases, the majority of them have less than 5,000 people, they don't have professional staff, period. They're that small. Should they be in the business of zoning? Should we have the zoning referendum, at the local level? We've looked at different programs when it comes out there. There's a lot of great, and then I think I give you credit, as well as folks in the housing industry, for pushing this in the last budget that the governor and lieutenant governor and General Assembly adopted, that they did increase, some spending, that they created a state low-income housing tax credit program, which we did not have before. We were just using the federal program, so now there's a state match. Senate president really pushed hard to create a single-family home, market rate program. So we've got that. We've got a welcome home program that's about home remodeling. So we're tackling it, and it's those are each three, I think, $100 million programs. This issue, from a market standpoint, is bigger than the entire $100 billion, $80-90 billion state budget in the state. There's not a money solution to this alone. Now,
so we can't scale the subsidies. We need to make the regulatory climate better so that private money will flow in. A lot of these folks aren't even asking for money. They just want a system that works.
Yeah, and I think that they want a system that works. And again, some cities have been great at using property tax abatements to entice development, and that's been very successful. The challenge is to get a full 100% 15-year property tax abatement, you need to get school board approval. And there's some great school boards and treasurers that are great to work with that say, yeah, this is a great partnership. We want to get this done. A lot of them aren't supportive of housing, and we've had a couple districts actually just come out and oppose residential development period, which is just crazy to me. I thought they were in the business of teaching kids. So a lot of them have been
it's
there.
It's like a business saying they don't want any new customers.
Right. So that's crazy. So we think there's some, regulatory changes related to the incentives policy that needs to drive that decision to the cities, to the local governments, to the counties. Not just a blanket abatement, but the local government would have to make that decision. We do think there are some good programs. The Transformational Mixed Use District program is one that's really unique to Ohio. Big, large-scale projects. It's a $100 million premium tax credit program that can go towards, there's a major city and small city, aspect to it. But it's not enough money. It's oversubscribed every time they send out the applications. So again, we think that's an area that warrants more spending. We think, Ohio is behind Indiana on using the New Markets tax credit program at the state level. I think Indiana has a $100 million New Markets tax credit program in a state that is substantially smaller than Ohio. Has a historic preservation tax credit program for communities big and small, can be phenomenal for residential development. Think of that in a small town. Think of that second and third story in Main Street. Those could be apartments. And we also came up with an idea of a rural residential a loan program that's modeled. Ohio has a rural industrial park loan program that's kind of modeled after that program, where in essence half of it would be a forgivable loan to a developer that's going to go into rural markets. Because rural markets everywhere have the opposite problem of Central Ohio. They're not fighting referendums, at the local level. The local communities cannot get a developer to come to town because they're losing population.
Right.
So again, we can't. Our approach we recommended didn't just say let's just worry about the city of Columbus. We've got 88 counties, very diverse state. How do we try and address everything?
One of the things I remember from my time in Congress on the Financial Services Committee is that while housing in urban areas is overseen by Housing and Urban Development, rural housing is overseen by the Department of Agriculture, and it's not like people go to the Department of Agriculture to work on housing. Right. So there doesn't seem to be a coherent rural strategy, not just in Ohio, but anywhere in the country. Yeah. There doesn't seem to be a coherent rural housing strategy, and I'm hopeful that some folks in both Congress and the administration will work on that, because our rural communities need housing too, and there's just not, like you said, not a lot of folks working in that area. And if there was at least a coherent rural strategy, even for fixing up existing infrastructure and structures that are there, whether it's a second floor in a small town of an office building or it was other structures that need some attention, doesn't have to be brand new stuff. Renovation, I think, works just as well.
Well, in the rural markets, really everywhere, whether it's Ohio or Indiana or, you pick your favorite southern state, are where the manufacturing base of the nation is, right? Right. We have not been putting large-scale manufacturing into cities for 50 years. We've been taking them out. So the rural markets actually have jobs. The challenge is that they are struggling to hold on to their 18-year-olds. Their 18-year-olds graduate from high school, and they either go to college or they move out of town for work. And the reality is the jobs are there, but in a lot of cases the housing's not. Right. And because again, we do corporate site location work for companies, and it used to just be workforce, right? Everyone, you draw a circle around a potential site and say, okay, do they have the workers within 45 minutes travel time to work in this facility? You still got to draw that circle, right? Because workforce is still a challenge. But the other question you have to ask is, okay, where are they going to live? Yeah. You're looking to bring 200 workers in, and you look at a rural community.
They don't have the housing.
Right. And you can draw a little bit circle for rural because they'll travel longer. But, if you don't have a place for them to live, and it isn't, and maybe it's a big single-family home development, maybe it's multifamily, maybe it's some rehab stuff, in a small downtown, that rural community doesn't have any chance.
Great point.
Yeah.
You guys talked earlier about the great situation Central Ohio is in with growth, the Intel opportunity that's in New Albany, and just down the road in Sabina, the Honda battery plant. John, are you worried that that'll create a shortage of skilled trades that are needed in the housing market, or do you feel comfortable that people will be able to get the help they need given those competing construction projects that are much bigger and probably pay higher wages?
You're 100% right on the wages. It's certainly impacted the cost of doing projects in the region, but in all honesty, this is a first world problem, and there was some initial skepticism surrounding not just the project in New Albany. You've got the airport, you've got Ohio State on a construction churn regularly, but our folks have primarily figured out a way to navigate that right now. And we've been really impressed with that. And I think a couple quarters ago, Columbus was the second biggest market in the United States in terms of construction workers relocating here.
Oh, wow.
So we want to keep that trend up. I hope that folks come here to work on these projects and stay.
Right.
And
if we can give them a place to live, that'd be great.
Well, that 100%, and continue to stay. And every time we build a single family home, 2.7 jobs are sustained for a year. And,
wow.
And when you think about building out a community, and for every apartment unit, I believe it's 1.25 jobs in the construction industry. So, not only is housing important, the construction industry in and of itself is super important. And, I think aligning with the Chamber's mission, I don't think there's a more owner-operated industry in the United States than residential construction.
Absolutely. And they pay great wages. And whether you're the owner of the company or you're a worker, you can raise a family on the wages they pay. They're great jobs.
Yeah,
100%. And I think that's what's a lot frustrating for us is we have an industry that is willing to invest millions upon millions of dollars into communities and put people to work. And in many cases, we're not being given the opportunity to produce what's needed. And when we do that, not only does it add value to the property and to the residents of that community, it provides great opportunities for the people who work in this industry.
Great. Well, I'm excited to hear that the labor demand is not really causing a slowdown in building. What role do you two think that technology plays in shaping the future of housing in Ohio? Are there innovations in building products? Are there innovations in other parts of the construction process that could increase affordability or, shorten time frames, help build more homes in Ohio?
That's a really great question. I think one of the challenges we have, and we're fortunate in Ohio, the building code on the residential side system is set up for state approval, so the state doesn't reflexively adopt the International Code Council's updates, which, quite frankly, oftentimes just increase the cost of housing over and over again and lead to less innovation because they're so prescriptive in how things have to be done and what products are out there. We're seeing more and more innovation, whether it's some 3D printing that's hitting the market, the modular housing and prefab construction. Brad DeHaze has a great project.
I'm going up to visit that. That's, I think of it as sort of Lego homes because they can bolt them right on top of each other up to 3 to 4 stories.
Yep.
I'm super excited to go visit his plant, and I've talked to Brad about it, but I'm excited to see it for myself.
We in many ways, we build homes the same way we've built them for the last 100 years, and there hasn't been a ton of innovation in the construction process itself. But there are things we're seeing here in Columbus and in the state of Ohio that we didn't used to see. More homes are being built without basements, and that's a trend. Honestly, Indianapolis, again, another
we see
market.
that in a lot of growing markets.
Yep.
That's how they build homes.
And especially in the South, they can't dig into clay too much down in the South. So what we figured out is, you can still build an effective house without the basement. It saves money and it moves processes along a little bit easier. So we're seeing some of those innovations. And every time a new home is built, it performs from an energy efficiency standpoint significantly better. I think one of the things that we wish the feds would do would be to take that into account on lending restrictions. And, hey, this new house, yes, it may be this $400,000 house is priced the same as an existing home, but from an energy performance, it's going to save the owner a lot more money on utilities because of how it's built. And we wish that the powers that be in charge of lending in this country would take that into consideration because significant savings.
And we're now seeing Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae give loans to pre-built houses. They didn't used to. They used to have to do what's called a chattel loan, which were a lot more expensive. Now you're seeing the ability to get that. Will we see 3D printed homes in Ohio anytime soon?
I would say I think the likelihood is at some point in the next decade plus, we're going to see a lot more uses of innovative technology. And I think how it's scaled and who brings that to market first will be interesting, and in kind of what capacity. Our builders are always looking at new technologies, and I think who adopts it first, it's going to be very interesting to see. But while construction and the workforce has not been as troublesome and bleak as some had thought, in the future we continue to lose skilled tradespeople, and when you at all levels, and I think people are looking at automation and whatever they can do to perhaps combat that moving forward.
Great. Well, certainly necessity is the mother of invention. So maybe we'll see early adoption here in Central Ohio. Dave, you talked a little bit about the demographic shifts, aging population in Ohio. A lot of those people are staying in their homes longer, which means there's less homes over or coming available. So not as much flow of housing in the market. Move toward urbanization, or at least suburbanization, where people are moving from the rural areas still to the suburbs. How are those trends influencing demands on housing and where we need housing? What does all that mean?
Yeah, I think it's having demographics always impacts every market, right? The reality of Ohio is the same reality you're going to see everywhere. It's in every state. It's in every country. I gave a speech in Texas, and Texas is losing as many people in the rural communities as Ohio is. So it's not, and they're the fastest growing state in the union. So it's not just an Ohio issue, but the reality is the rural markets are becoming depopulated. I think Greater Ohio had a study that if Central Ohio, if Columbus, Franklin County were not in the state, that the state would have lost 100,000 people. Wow. So, folks are, gravitating towards faster growing mid-sized urban markets. The bigger cities have been struggling a little bit since COVID. Maybe they come back, but they've been struggling, costs, a lot of transit, transportation, a lot of challenges there. So you have, Ohio is fortunate that it has a growing Central Ohio marketplace. I'd probably say it's fortunate it has a growing Cincinnati area marketplace. It's got a lot of struggles in its industrial heartland. If you kind of travel north of Interstate 70 and you look at that, I always tell folks that you could almost count this as true, that if there's a city that was really growing 100 years ago, they're probably struggling now. The fastest growing city in America in 1920 was Akron. So that industrial revolution that just boomed for about 100 years, right? And the Toledo, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Youngstown market also went to Mansfield, also went to Lima, also went to Springfield, a bunch of legacy cities. It's been slowing down since the 70s. And the reality is, if your area is not growing in population, if you're not, if you're not, you don't keep your young people, quite frankly, they move here, right? Either for one of the 100,000 college students in this region, or they move here for work. And if you don't keep the young people, it just becomes difficult to gain investment, right? From the private sector. I don't care if it's housing. Then you struggle to keep your hospital. Then you struggle to keep your grocery store. And I would tell you that if you're a region that's lost its grocery store and lost its hospital, you've got problems, because you're not going to keep your employers. And so again, I think those demographic shifts can be challenges. I also think they can be good news, and they can create new markets. And I would use this growth in multifamily as an example in downtowns. And I'd use downtown Cleveland as an example and give them a lot of credit. There's 25,000 people that live in downtown Cleveland. They're double the size in population of downtown Columbus. They have older buildings, so it's been easier to transition them to multifamily. But they've kept a generation of younger people, but they've also kept, that baby boomer group that's retiring and says, I'm tired of cutting the grass, right? I'm tired of taking care of this house. So I think it can also create development opportunities in a lot of these downtowns for young people, but also for those older folks that are like, well, I'm pretty much tired of, the kids are gone. Why do we have this 3,000 square foot house? So I see that trend as being a big positive.
Do you see that trend in urban areas continuing? The building right next to us used to be the PNC Tower.
Yep.
Jeff Edwards bought it, converted most of it to residential. It seems like downtowns are becoming arts and entertainment and housing districts. And certainly there's been a little bit of a slowdown on office needs after COVID. Do you see that trend continuing?
Absolutely, and I think you're being kind to say there's been a little bit of a slowdown in office. I think it's, I think the decline of these office towers in mid-sized to large cities may be the largest public policy issue we're going to face in the next decade. Columbus, again, a thriving, growing community. We've gone over all the great data. Its downtown office vacancy rate is twice Cleveland's, and in the Midwest, Chicago is 2 points higher, and then it's Columbus, and then Columbus, their downtown office vacancy rate is worse than every other city, worse than Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Detroit, Milwaukee, and those are all great cities, fun places to go, but their economies are not necessarily that great. So you have a staggering issue in places like downtown Columbus that needs to be addressed. And you've got buildings one building's nearly completely empty. That's downtown, right across from the State House. A couple others are maybe half full. Some maybe a third full. So it is primed for redevelopment, but it is not going to be cheap, because it's costly to transition.
Certainly expensive downtown, and I know they had to build a whole new elevator stack in that PNC building because it was just built the wrong way for what they needed. So I'm sure there were a lot of cost overruns, but it's finally open. I'm excited to go over there and check it out. And Jeff Edwards has done a great job. In fact, he's creating some real excitement downtown. He just announced another project back here. I guess he didn't announce it, but he filed the city plans, and everybody else announced it. Yeah. So for the parking lot between the YWCA and the PNC building, so right back behind us. So it does seem like there's some exciting things going on downtown. I know some other builders have really been doing a good job downtown too. John, do you see that as a trend in other cities as well?
Yeah, I think it is very expensive to make office to residential conversion. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I think what the Edwards Companies has done for downtown is just remarkable. When you think of the suburban communities in Central Ohio and around the region, there's a lot of B and C class office space that is going to be obsolete, and I think in many instances it's going to be easier to simply demo those buildings and start over.
Those will come down.
Yep, we're seeing
that. I saw that on Fifth Avenue. Somebody demoed an old office, and now they're going to build apartments there, right next to a few restaurants right on Fifth Avenue near Grandview Avenue.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that up on the north side in the Crosswoods area where the Champion Companies took a building down. It's in the process of demoing that. They're going to build a really high amenity community up there, and I think that we need to attack this issue with the same kind of veracity that we did brownfield remediation of old manufacturing sites.
Kind of the same issue, right?
Yep, it absolutely
Outdated.
is. And I really believe the states and the communities that get to this problem first are going to win. Yeah. If we wait and let other states figure it out, the investment dollars and the markets will go to those communities. And we need to be very aggressive. And there's a lot of great offices that were great even 5-6 years ago that are obsolete now. And how do we take those spaces, which are typically around transit corridors? They have parking, they have the water and sewer infrastructure in place. We just need to redevelop the sites. I think that's going to be the next wave for this community and others.
It's a great, and also including the suburbs in that. In this market, at least, the suburban office vacancy rates are higher than downtown.
Wow.
So all of those challenging downtown Columbus numbers I gave you, it's actually worse in the suburbs.
Wow. That's hard to believe. Yeah. Are there regulatory or policy changes that either of you see on the horizon that look like they're going to happen that will impact the housing market, or things we should all be focused on to make sure that we enact to make the housing market better?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd give a lot of credit to the Ohio Senate here. Senator Michelle Reynolds has been heading up a select committee on housing for the past several months. She has been not just having hearings in the State House, but she's taken the committee on the road, which is a little unique, and I think it's been a great opportunity to get feedback. They're going to be in the Senate, I think, planning legislation, so I think that really tees it up to start the debate. A lot of the money issues, I think, may well be included in that bill, but the reality is, in Ohio at least, you'll get most of those done in the operating budget next year. But I think that we have to have this debate now. Again, it's not simple. It's easy to complain about and call into question what townships do or don't do, or what schools do or don't do in this process. But the reality is, as I often explain to clients, however the system is, it wasn't set up by accident, right? So there are interest groups, and they could have interesting points to bring up, and it'll be an interesting debate. See what we do. But yeah, we really see it starting in the Ohio Senate, and we're hopefully pushing it with the House as well.
Senator Reynolds seems like she really wants to make some stuff happen in the process. Have you seen any sacred cows in the process, or are they really willing to look at everything it takes to make Ohio competitive for a housing market?
Well, I think it's so early in the process. I don't think anything's been said yes or no to, right? Again, there are we've tried to craft our proposals around townships, and again, a lot of states don't even have townships, but Ohio does. We've tried to basically say, look, if you're a larger, what I'll call an urban township, there's a lot of townships in the state, a lot in Cincinnati, a number in Central Ohio, where you're big enough that it's what's going to be called a home rule township, where we are a home rule state within the Constitution that empowers local governments to run themselves. But you're a bigger township, and you've got professional staff and a planning office and a team built around trying to get land use done. We're not saying, our belief is that, hey, that's a legitimate process, and that's something that should stay. But if you're a really small, predominantly rural township that really has, literally less than 5,000 people in the majority of cases for Ohio's townships, chances are you don't really even have enough revenue to even have a staff member that runs the township. You get 3 volunteers to be township trustees. God bless them. They're not doing it for the money. I think they make $10,000 a year. You may have a zoning inspector that's the staff member. I'll put staff members in air quotes, but they do this job part-time. Literally have to call them and say, hey, when you're available to come, look at this site. We don't really think that's the place billion-dollar zoning decisions should sit for anything, whether it's for residential or industrial projects. We don't think the school district should really be engaged in deciding whether tax abatements are done for housing or not. That's how it gets done in Indiana. That is a city and a county decision. So, again, those are not easy decisions. Legislators have townships and they have school districts. And I'm a former legislator, as you are, Steve. And the reality is you don't wake up as a legislator on Monday and say my goal is to alienate
a whole bunch of people.
So it'll be a debate.
Let me go there and ask the next logical question, because you brought it up. Ohio is a home rule state. Is home rule part of the problem here? Or maybe is it only a problem in certain areas that aren't sophisticated enough to do the job that they've been then tasked to do?
I'll let John jump in too. I'll use Columbus as an example. And there's lots of fights over home rule with a very conservative legislature on guns and e-cigarettes and a bunch of issues that catch a lot of the headlines. The biggest developer of housing in this region is the city of Columbus. And in fact, I can't even imagine what the BIA's housing study would be if Columbus were not doing what it is doing. There's 2,300 planned multifamily units coming online in downtown Columbus. Downtown Cleveland has 25,000 residential units. So, we see growth in home rule states. We see growth in non-home rule states. Indiana, I think, has a home rule their home rule state too. It's not as I think we're a stronger home rule state because it's in the Constitution, but Indiana's found a way to let the cities
do what they need to do.
What they need to do.
Okay. And I'm not trying to force an issue. I just figured, nothing should be off limits about what we talk about or what we look at. We need to look for answers that makes Ohio competitive. So it was at least worth asking the question.
Well, and I think, Steve, you're on the right thought here. We know that we're losing population, as are a lot of the states around us. What do we do to reverse that? How do we win in housing? How do we win in population growth? I don't think it's a good enough answer to say, well, we've been doing this since the 40s. That's not a good enough reason to do anything in today's environment. We should be leading.
Yeah.
And I think the legislature has the opportunity to lead on housing creation in a way that puts Ohio in the driver's seat for economic growth.
Let's close this out on a more collaborative approach. What can communities and stakeholders do collaboratively to address housing-related challenges and foster a sustainable development opportunity in Ohio where we continue to grow and can become more competitive and meet the housing needs of our current population and those that might want to live here?
I think what we ask communities, just in the same way any business would be to have updated rules and regulations and certainty that doesn't change on a year-to-year basis as people make investments. So we've asked communities to update their land use plans for what is kind of reflective of the markets today, maybe not what was reflective historically. We're asking for infrastructure and investments in infrastructure, water and sewer. And we've learned this as the region continues to grow, that we have a lot of aging systems that are at maximum capacity that need state dollars to help fund that infrastructure. So infrastructure, regulations and rules that are understandable, and a willingness to have a positive dialogue with the folks who are interested in investing millions of dollars in your community. There's no other business that is simply that interested in investing millions of dollars in a community in a way that benefits everyone, that gets treated by some the way that the residential development community has. We have great local folks and out-of-state folks who want to make Ohio great and can continue to build this state. And I think having an open dialogue on what is possible. I'll add one thing. I know we're pushing time here, but thank you and the Chamber for hosting the Ohio Housing Summit a few weeks ago. Yeah. Mark Johns from Heath, the mayor of Heath, and you want to talk about a community that's right adjacent to the Intel project and going to see it all. He walked through a story where a developer, a builder came in and pitched a housing development, and he said he didn't like it. Just the lots were too small. He likes big lots. He likes to mow his yard, and I joked with him. I said, you can mow your yard just as long. You got to cut it twice. But he said what he did was he went and he talked with people and he looked at the data and he realized that what the builder was pitching was actually really in line with what the market needed. And he said, I had to rethink the way I made these decisions and the way we made a decision. Just because I may not personally want to live in that community doesn't mean that somebody doesn't.
Lots of other people do. I tell people when they look at density, think about trick-or-treating with a toddler.
Yep.
Yeah. And you want houses closer together. That's how people want to live today.
Right.
And that's what the market wants. But a lot of our elected officials want, half-acre lots or bigger lots that actually would discourage that and people might not want. So thanks for that. Well, this has been a great conversation. John Melchi from the Building Industry Association and Dave Robinson from the Montrose Group, who just did a study on housing in Ohio. Do either of you have any closing comments before we close this out?
If you're interested in the white paper, you can go to biahomebuilders.com, and under our advocacy tab is the white paper. And we always remind people that homes are where jobs go at night.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd say thanks, as John mentioned, to the Chamber for their leadership and your leadership on the housing issue. I think it's great that the state's leading business trade association recognizes the importance of it.
Well, housing is a driving factor of our growth opportunity in the future. We know that. That's why we've made it a central point of our blueprint for Ohio's economic future. That wraps up another thoughtful episode of Down to Business. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so that you can get more conversations in the future with key leaders who influence Ohio's business scene. Don't forget to leave a review. It helps us bring content and more listeners to our podcast. Until next time, please stay informed, stay inspired, and let's keep Ohio business community thriving. Thanks for being with us on the Down to Business podcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.